Hi, I'm Tanic Sims too, but you can call me Tanny, and welcome back to the Corruption Chronicles. After uploading How Corrupt is Throneville Anyway, I posted a poll asking which hood you all wanted to see next, and this hood won by a landslide, so book a taxi and prepare for Mrs. Crumplebottom's Purse of Wrath, because it looks like we're going downtown. Just before we start though, if this is your first time here, or if you just need a refresher on what hood corruption is, hood corruption in The Sims 2 is when data unique to a specific hood is broken or otherwise improperly assigned, leading to these broken references spreading around the hood. The hoods shipped with the game come with varying levels of corruption already, although as we work through the post-university subhoods and EP hoods, the extent of corruption will start to dwindle. However, there are still a few interesting glitches and oversights worth covering. It's also important with this topic's rising popularity to clarify what is and isn't corruption and dispel any misconceptions. So with all that being said, let's find out just how corrupt downtown is anyway. As we've seen in the videos for the base game hoods, ancestral sims were often the root of most of the hood's corruption, because most of them were missing graves or were even partially deleted in development, thus their character files were shredded, and even having a grave wasn't always a guarantee that an ancestor would have complete character data or be safe to resurrect due to other glitches. With the first expansion pack, University, and its new in-game resurrection feature came an incentive for Maxis to create functional ancestors who could be resurrected and played without trouble. This is perhaps first demonstrated in the second expansion pack, Nightlife. Though Downtown does not ship with any living playable sims like most of the subhoods, it is home to a few dead sims, namely the Triku family and Raynell Ninja. The two Triku teenagers and Raynell are buried on an unoccupied residential lot called the House of Fallen Trees, whereas the other members of the Fallen Triku family are buried at Gothia Green Lawns, the cemetery lot in Downtown, showcasing Nightlife's new Move Grave feature. Although I said having a grave is not always an indication that a Maxis ancestor is safe to resurrect, it does at least mean all these deceased Downtown Sims character files are accounted for. They all have proper full character data in that they have memories, personalities, valid aspirations, interests, DNA, and so on. There's nothing funny going on with their object data as they are all recognised as people and their family ties are intact. Well, almost. But we'll get onto that later. Most of all, none of them are unlinked, meaning they can easily be resurrected via in-game tools such as the Resurrect Nomatron. It may seem that the Triku family have no living relatives, therefore a player still wouldn't be able to resurrect them normally even though they are resurrectable. Although of course using cheats, mods, or SimP can do the trick. Ooh. This is how Raynell in particular will need to be resurrected. However, there does exist a more organic way to resurrect the Trikus. The family's patriarch John Smith Triku, or Jonathan Triku in the UK English version of the game, has 6 living teenage descendants who are all downtownies. If one of these teens is made playable, they should be able to resurrect their father, who can then resurrect the rest of his family. Since it's extremely rare for townies in The Sims 2 to have any familial relations, players believe the Triku family were intended to be resurrected, or at the very least, Maxis were aware that players had grown quite fond of necromancy after University dropped, and would surely continue enjoying turning graveyards into playgrounds. Now, you're probably wondering, wait, if all these deceased Sims, usually the cause of most corruption-related problems in the Maxis-made hoods, have full character data, graves, and were most likely intended to have been resurrected, then why are they included in this corruption compilation? To be honest, the Triku family and Raynell are neither inherently corrupt, nor will, or really should, they cause hood corruption if resurrected, even in the original Maxis-made template. For the most part, they're pretty safe to either play or leave to rest in peace. But this is The Sims 2 we're talking about. and somehow even the tamer of the glitchy Sims still have some problems worth exploring. Cast your minds back to about a minute or two ago when we first met these 6 teenage downtownies. As mentioned, they are all the children of John Smith Chiku, and though their names will become randomized once downtown is added to a neighborhood, they share the same surname of teens in the game files, possibly hinting to their relation to each other and, well, their age. On first glance, the teens seem to have all the correct family flags set. They are all linked to both their father and each other in their family trees. However, while the latter relationship may be mutual, the former is only partially set. In-game, John Smith will treat these teenagers as family, and their portraits will show the family icon in his relationship panel. However, this is not reflected in his family ties, and his 6 other children will not appear in his family tree in-game either. The teens do not appear under the related section. In fact, it's like he doesn't even know of their existence. From a storytelling perspective, this makes sense. Perhaps they were the result of John's extramarital escapades, and so he died without knowing he had more children. And from the game's perspective, as touched upon briefly earlier, it's highly likely the Chiku family were intended to be resurrected, and these living descendants give players access to them by being able to resurrect their father, who can then go on and resurrect the rest of the Chiku clan. In this case, correct and most of all mutual family ties wouldn't be necessary in achieving the ultimate goal of resurrecting the Chikus. As long as the teens know John Smith is their father, it doesn't matter if he only partially recognizes them as family, but it does pose quite the predicament when it comes to the other family members. Since John Smith's ties to these teens are very loose and they are absent from the Chiku family tree, this means that the rest of the Chikus do not have correct family flags with them either. In fact, they have absolutely no family flags, and this is mutual. The teens only recognise John Smith as family and no one else, not even their half-siblings Janelle and Nylissit. Again, this makes sense in terms of lore, and is more an oversight than anything else. If a player just leaves the Chikus to rest in peace, it may never become a problem. However, since the Chikus were and still are popular Sims to resurrect, it's worth mentioning that the Chiku family are not properly connected to their living downtowny relatives and won't consider them family. So, let's say a player decides to resurrect the Chiku family without enlisting the help of the downtowny teens, and thus may not be aware that they're related, or at least intended to be. Said player decides to resurrect black-haired Fodwan Triku, whose turn-ons include blonde hair and fitness, who goes on to meet blonde-haired Orient teens who's attracted to black hair. I am sure you can imagine what could happen there, as they won't consider one another family, despite being niece and uncle respectively. Ordinarily, the game checks for family ties before launching every romantic interaction, and even has checks to ensure a sim does not have an alien parent when they are abducted in order to avoid a pretty icky situation, since there's only one pollination technician in an unmodded game. But if these family ties aren't there, like in the case of the Triku teens and their deceased should-be relatives, then as far as the game's concerned, they're not related, and so the Are We Blood Relatives check returns false, ultimately allowing the romantic interactions to go ahead. Though the most well-known method of resurrecting the Trikus involves John Smith's downtowny descendants, we can't assume every player will resurrect them this way or that they'll be aware of the connection. Just like how players may have paired the Curious brothers with one of their alien sisters because, well, there aren't any barriers stopping them from doing so. Up to you to decide if the missing family ties are a bug or a feature, but either way, it's been included here as an example of oversights in the Downtown Sims data. As established earlier, all deceased members of the Triku family and Raynell have memories, something quite rare, though not unheard of, for ancestral Sims shipped early in the Sims 2's lifespan. While these memories just add proof to the family's character files being intact, there is a slight technical flaw when it comes to subhood Sims having memories. All memories need subjects, what or whom the memory is about. If a memory pertains to a sim, then that sim is identified by their GUID and their instance number, the subject instance. Both of these values should be unique to each sim because they are methods of identification, much like neighbor IDs or NIDs. In a normal main neighbourhood, the memory should correctly point to valid sims using this information. All the downtown sims were created in a standalone neighbourhood with the ID N006. We know this because all downtown residents, from NPCs and townies to the Trikus and Raynell's object data, reference this neighbourhood ID, plus Nylissit's original ID, N006 user 55, exists in the data for the House of Fallen Trees. But when the downtown template is added to a hood, then all relevant file names will change to reflect the main hood's ID, and most of all sims' GUIDs and instance numbers will be shuffled around as to not conflict with existing sims already in the hood. This now means that all downtown sims' memories are broken and invalid, and this is not exclusive to the Trikus either. NPCs and Raynell Ninja's memories are all wrong now too. This isn't actually unique to downtown either. All subhoods and stealth hoods share this bug. This isn't totally harmful, and a player most likely might never notice since the existing memories will always show the correct name and image in game and in SimPE, despite the fact they are now indeed pointing to the wrong sim. However, Hood Checker will flag all the memories where a subject instance number is incorrect. In Downtown's case, well, that's all of them. The most problematic and noticeable example of these incorrect subject instance memories comes in the form of a certain inheritance memory. Jennifer, Kiernan, Frikorith, and Voidon have preset memories of John Smith Triku giving them inheritance. While the subject instance is technically now wrong behind the scenes, John Smith's thumbnail and name will appear correctly in the memory because these memories were created before Downtown is added to a main hood, where all the instance numbers were correct. However, Janelle, Kavornan, and Nylissit have no memory of inheriting from John Smith yet. Instead, they have an invisible inheritance token indicating to the game that they are waiting on some big bucks. The raw data for inheritance tokens not only contain information about the expected amount of simoleons, but also reference the deceased sim's instance number. And so, upon resurrection, these three Trikus will gain a memory of inheriting money. This memory is generated based on the same raw data as the token, and will use the sim instance number referenced in the token as the memory's subject instance. By looking at the memories of the other Trikus, it's evident that this memory is supposed to point to John Smith Triku. However, Janelle, Kavornan, and Nylissit will instead have a memory of receiving inheritance from a seemingly random sim in the neighbourhood. For example, players who added Downtown to Pleasantview report seeing these memories as being inherited money from Bo, most likely referring to Bo Broke, who is a toddler, alive, and, well, broke. This is because in the Downtown template, or N006, John Smith Triku's instance number is 0x0017. All pre-existing memories created when Downtown was N006, referring to him, thus point to this subject instance. However, Janelle, Kavornan, and Nylissit's inheritance memories are generated only after they're resurrected, and go off the instance number in the inheritance token, which is still referencing John Smith's former instance number. But Bo's already backseed this number in Pleasantview. It'd be embarrassing if they both turned up wearing the same instance number, so one of them is gonna have to change. And so it's only fair that John Smith has to get a new instance number since he's the new arrival. Okay, the more technical reason is because, like NIDs, sim instance numbers are with them for life. Well, unless they're from a subhood like Downtown apparently, and multiple sims should never share that same number because that would be confusing. Anyway, any memories where John Smith is the subject are now wrong because while the subject UID has actually updated to reflect his new one, the subject instance is incorrect. He doesn't live at 0x0017 anymore. The inheritance token and corresponding memory don't know that though, and will just go ahead with creating the memory using the outdated instance number mentioned in the raw data. In the empty tested I'm using for this video, John Smith's instance number dropped down to 0x0016, and so the new owner of 0x0017, Cheryl Miller, has taken his place in the inheritance memories generated for Janelle, Cavornan and Nylissit. Guess she couldn't wait for her upcoming section as a starring role and needed to make a cameo. As far as the game's concerned, it's pointing to the correct hexadecimal string that makes up a Sim's instance number, since it doesn't take Sim's names into account. Thus it doesn't realise the subject instance is no longer consistent with the actual memory subject. Therefore, the game finds no need to error check and fix the subhood Sim's subject instance to reflect their shiny new instance number once they're added to a main hood. In hoods where there is no sim description with the instance number of 0x0017, such as Veronaville, Janelle, Cavornan and Nylissit still have the inheritance token referencing this instance. However, the correlating memory will simply not generate in-game, probably because it's now not pointing to any valid sim. A hood checker also flags these tokens as invalid, although it will not be able to fix them. Is this a problem? Well, it does mean all these memories are corrupted. This may sound terrifying, but honestly once you demystify corruption, it really does just boil down to invalid data and the game making funky decisions due to said invalid data, such as wonky memories. Luckily, unlike some more irreversible forms of corruption, this problem is fixable. You could manually edit the raw data of all these memories in SimPE, or you could sit back, relax, and let HoodChecker do all the hard work for you. It may also be a good idea to clear all gossip with the bat box to ensure the invalid memories don't spread around the hood anymore. Alas, as brilliant as HoodChecker is, it can't fix another similar memory problem in downtown. On top of needing a subject, all memories need a valid event owner. This is the sim who generates the memory, thus the memory belongs to them. They are the sim who holds the memory slot. In the case of gossip, a sim has an invisible memory not viewable in-game about another sim who is the original owner of said memory. The second sim to whom the memory points is considered the owner because they generated the original memory that has spread to other sims through gossip. This is an example of a gossip memory viewed in SimPE. They are noticeable because they are highlighted in blue and start with the word invisible. My sim has heard through the grapevine that Rodney Hamilton went to college, and he has collected Rodney's memory of going to college as gossip. In the owner field, Rodney Hamilton is cited as the memory owner, even though the memory appears in my sim slot. Now take a look at these blue memories in the Triku family slots. They all have a gossip memory about the deaths of their other family members. However, you may have noticed a difference. The string gossip about name of sim is missing. This is because these memories are ownerless. There is a subject, however the owner field is blank. These particular memories are ones HoodChecker is unsure about due to their absent owners and will flag them with the message "owner does not exist." This does not mean the gossip memory belongs to a non-existent sim that the game is attempting to reference. It just means the owner string is missing. These are the memories Pescado describes as corrupted death memories. His mod No Corrupted Death Memory is considered a staple anti-corruption mod and recommended to all Sims 2 players, though unfortunately it cannot remove existing memory markers, including those found in each of the Triku family members' slots. Players will need to, as Pescado says, expunge them with SimPE. Using the Batbox's option to wipe corrupt memories may also help in removing these particular markers. Though HoodChecker alone cannot fix these memories either, you can clear the issue by setting the owner to the relevant sim for all instances of this memory in SimPE. As it's difficult to tell whom the original owner should be, you can follow this tutorial by Crystal Flame 360 and set the owner as the memory slot holder. It is a good idea to do this as soon as possible to prevent it from spreading further. Alternatively, blue memories are safe to remove, and so you could delete them in SimPE instead, or you could wipe all gossip entirely with tools such as the Batbox, which is a pretty good idea in general every now and then, as gossip has the potential to spread invalid references at worst and just gets clogged up and boring at best. Or, even better, Meet Me to the River has removed all of these rogue gossip memories in her clean downtown template, so all the hard work has been done for you. She has also added the inheritance memories for Janelle, Cavornan and Nylissit, avoiding surprises if resurrected like a certain broke Benefactor. As for the other memory problems, these are unavoidable even with a clean template due to the game's coding. However, as mentioned, Hood Checker should be able to fix all the incorrect subject instances. After that, the Hood Checker report for hoods with Meet Me to the River's downtown template will be clean. When a sim dies, one of the protocols the game does is remove any engagement or marriage flags. Thus, if a player wishes to resurrect Nylissit Triku, she will no longer be married to her husband Kiernan and vice versa, allowing her to either move on and find someone else or remarry Kiernan. This process should be straightforward, but some players reported that Nylissit was unable to get married. The cinematic would play, but the engaged flag would still remain afterwards, even though she will have a memory of getting married. If a player attempted a second shot at getting Nylissit hitched, the same problem would occur, and a duplicate marriage memory would appear. Note how I used the past tense. This bug was luckily fixed with the Apartment Life patch, presumably because a playable sim in Belladonna Cove, Chastity Gear, shared this issue. However, as with other historic bugs, it has been included not only as an insight into past problems, but also because some players may be running older versions of the game. This is also not totally corruption per se either, much like Olivia Monty or Brandy Broke's pregnancies. It's just another noteworthy bug to add to the list. Plus, as I mentioned in the Veronaville video, it's important to clarify outdated information, especially now this topic has become so popular in the Sims 2 community. Since I play with the Ultimate Collection, I was unable to reproduce this bug. However, if you would like to see it in action, you can check out Calipers and Tong's video on the subject, who has given me permission to share their footage in this video. Judging from their video, it appears that Nylissit and her should-be spouse are reset after there should have been nuptials, thus probably somehow interfering with the flag setting process. Aside from the unset flags, there are two interesting differences between mine and Caliper's footage. First, only Nylissit gains a memory of getting married in Caliper's video, whereas her spouse does not. In mine, both spouses correctly received the memory. Secondly, in my game, Nylissit and spouse have the usually subsequent spouse join the family memory, but this is absent in Caliper's tests. Somewhere down the line, a node might have tripped up and returned an error, but where and why? Based on how Nylissit and her forever fiancé snap out of their places under the wedding arch in Caliper's video, an object error must have occurred, possibly during the cinematic. Without testing cheats enabled, the game does not inform players of errors and instead tries to resolve them by resetting the affected objects. This is also known as a jump bug, and it's what happened in Caliper's tests. Unfortunately though, without access to the stack trace, it's difficult to determine what exactly went wrong, and even with a stack trace, this bug left many players scratching their heads. Back in the day, players did report a marriage jump bug that sometimes even affected their own sims. This seems to have been problematic enough that it led to Pescado releasing a mod that forced the game to ignore the error and attempt to keep going with the marriage. In two separate threads, players mentioned the object error being object referred to must be a person. This uncommon error is the result of the game expecting a neighbour ID belonging to a person, except it doesn't get one. But Nylissit is definitely a person and her object data reflects that. Another explanation I found is that it could potentially be related to the marriage memories, since the error logs do reference behaviour functions pertaining to memories. Though not a mod related to marriage, Simler90 found a rare issue with the memory version of their mood mod, where the game would first check a sim's gossip memories, then it would go on to check the relationship between the sim and the memory owner. The problem is that some sims in the pre-made hoods have memories that cite a non-existent ID as their owner. In Nylissit's case, she does have ownerless gossip memories. But if this is a potential reason why this error occurred, then surely it would have affected the whole family, as they all have these corrupted death memories. And I could only find one instance of someone dealing with this problem with both Nylissit and Janelle in their game. Ultimately though, even Pescado said nobody knows why this happens, attributing it to possibly garbage values, and other well-known modder 2Jaffs agreed that it was likely an e-access bug. Still, as treasure hunters, it's natural to be curious about why these seemingly arbitrary problems occur. Though I sadly couldn't find a definitive answer related to the cause of this specific bug, this insight from Max's producer and designer Hunter Howe could be applicable here. Jokingly explaining the tuning process and why it's necessary, Hunter says, "Oops, I set one number too high and now Sims do absolutely nothing but talk on cell phones. Forever. Until they die." It could be possible that something similar may have happened with Nylissit. With any program, especially one as complex and ambitious as The Sims 2, it's, as Hunter says, easy for things to go out of whack. According to the characters folder, there are 78 character files included with the downtown template, so why do the files end at user 105? In the downtown template, a total of 28 neighbour IDs are missing. Initially, I was unsure how significant this was, considering the fact that, as we've covered, downtown Sims don't retain their original IDs when added to a main neighbourhood. Therefore, they just end up filling the gaps. Or, more accurately, their new NIDs would continue in ascending numerical order in a primary neighbourhood anyway, so this probably wasn't a huge problem and players would likely never notice. Still though, it does beg the question of why these IDs are missing in the first place. Combined with findings from Hoodchecker, however, there may be two main possibilities. Either Sims were deleted in development, or these are all just junk data. Let's examine the first theory with the help of Hoodchecker. In the sim relations section, Hoodchecker flags a few relationships between Sims who do not exist and universal NPCs. It references two Sims in particular, citing their instance numbers as being 0x002C and 0x002E. However, according to SimPE, there are no sim descriptions with these instance numbers in the downtown template, so they are not valid Sims. Yet, the game somehow managed to generate relationships between object NPCs, which is weird on its own of course, but more on that later, and Sims who don't even exist in the downtown template. Did these Sims once exist, only to be deleted? That would explain why their sim descriptions are missing, yet references to them exist in other records such as sim relations, since sim data are stored in several different places. Alternatively, with the second theory in mind, these can be common errors generated through normal gameplay, and are not always an indication of anything too serious. Hoodchecker luckily can also remove them without problem each time. Even so though, you do have to wonder why the game might generate relationships between non-existent Sims, especially if the same invalid instance numbers seem to pop up with every run. In the Wants and Fears section, Hoodchecker flags almost 200 sim Wants and Fears records that belong to Sims who do not exist. This lines up with SimPE's documentation of over 270 Wants and Fears records. Yet there are only 85 sim descriptions in downtown. Certain object NPCs are included along with the 78 new character files. So almost 200 sim Wants and Fears records are what are known as dangling sim Wants and Fears. They don't belong to any existing sim. Dangling sim Wants and Fears usually indicate a sim has been deleted, because Wants and Fears are some of the data that get left over when a sim is improperly deleted and lead to problems such as toddlers having making inappropriate wants. Similarly, there are around 300 sim DNA records, which again seems like a huge discrepancy when compared to the almost 80 total character files in the characters folder. Once again though, hood checkers should be able to remove these homeless wants and fears records without issue. On the other hand though, hood checker does not report sims without character files in downtown. In an unmodded game, this message may suggest a sim's user data has been deleted, however their sim description record still exists in the hood. Then again, pre-made hoods with a significant amount of evidence pointing to sim deletion in development, such as Veronaville, don't have these warnings either, and we all know what may have happened there. So while this is all speculative, improper sim deletion can't totally be ruled out due to downtown's dangling sim wants and fears and overall references to instance numbers that don't belong to any sim description. Whatever the reason for missing IDs, non-existent sims, having relationships with the Grim Reaper et al, and dangling sim wants and fears, as mentioned, hood checker can luckily remove these invalid references. In Meet Me to the River's clean downtown template, all these references have already been purged for you. While we can't be sure that some sim references aren't also stored in more harder to reach locations, and it's important to remember hood checker can't fix everything, it is the best tool we mere players have in scraping up what Penny Griffin calls programming grit. In the case of downtown, hood checker is able to find and clear quite a few lingering invalid sim references. Of course, no hood can be perfectly clean, but the less invalid references in a hood, the less chance of a big fiery ball visible from space. We've covered dead sims and potentially deleted sims, so now it's time to complete the trilogy and meet some hidden downtown sims. Hidden in the default household are two elder sims named Cheryl Miller and Carol Gray. Unlike other downtownies and NPCs, Cheryl and Carol's names won't be randomized, presumably because they're in the default family and not the townie pool. Although Carol Gray does become Carol Brown in the Korean translation of the game, which I just found really hilarious for some reason. Their placement in the default household may suggest they have been hidden for some reason, disallowing them from appearing on community lots or as walk-bys. Although they are the first hidden sims in this series who actually have character data and thus can be summoned in-game. As with their hidden predecessors and proteges, Cheryl and Carol are pretty peculiar. While they do have personalities and admittedly very cute matching names, they don't have skill points or interests, and they don't have turn-ons and offs either, which is kind of odd when you consider how central those and the chemistry system in general were to Nightlife. These will all be randomized once they are initialized in-game, which is noteworthy because these characteristics are usually pretty set in stone for other downtownies. Ordinary downtownies and NPC skills, interests and turn-ons will always be the same as they are in the template. What's most interesting about these two ladies is that they seem to have been intended to be matchmakers, a service NPC introduced in Nightlife. Their character files contain all the necessary NPC behaviour constants, as well as the bitmap images of Bridget the Maid from The Sims 1 that some service NPCs such as matchmakers have. However, they do not wear the matchmaker outfit, nor is it even in their wardrobes. Moreover, their NPC type is apparently 0, implying they, aren't NPCs, when matchmakers should have the NPC decimal value of 18. Needless to say, they don't function like matchmakers or really any downtownies should, except they will still have elder voices and grey hair if aged down to any life stage, which is ordinarily pretty weird, but this is actually characteristic of all matchmakers for whatever reason, so some of their special coding still works at least. They're just unlikely to be stopping by with a magic lamp or dropping social workers out of the sky for blind dates in your game anytime soon. Why they were hidden is unknown, but one theory could be that they were remade. Cheryl and Carol were among the first Sims created in Downtown, and both of their version information in the template reads 1.2.0.232. This is the game version they would have been either created, last updated, or saved in. Since they are not playable Sims and thus not subject to as much tweaking, this version number is more likely to be the one in which they spawned. The other Matchmakers version information all reference 275. For comparison, the Downtown template's version number is 307, and Nightlife as a whole is version 355 of The Sims 2. When sorted by both file name and instance number, Cheryl and Carol are separated from the 3 functional matchmakers by just one sim, the female slob NPC Rebecca Garth. This suggests the matchmakers eventually included with Downtown were created not long after Cheryl and Carol. So it could be possible that perhaps something went wrong with Cheryl and Carol, or the matchmaker coding went through some changes, although it's difficult to say for sure as their NPC coding seems to match the other matchmakers. Perhaps the developers wanted to start over with matchmakers or Downtown NPCs in general somehow, and so banished them to the default bin to be condemned as NPC rejects. But then it is interesting how, like with the hidden Sims in Pleasantview and Strangetown, they weren't just deleted. Nightlife was only the second expansion pack, and EAXis allegedly, speculatively, in my opinion though, weren't exactly opposed to deleting Sims yet. Nightlife was released back when the delete all characters cheat was still deeply embedded in some players' neighbourhood setting up routines, and the official Prima guide advised players to delete tombstones if the ghosts annoyed them. Why were Carol and Cheryl the exception? Of course though, exiling them was a much better option than sending them through the shredder. More awesome than you user Ancient Sim noticed that Cheryl's appearance was very similar to an elder Downtownie known as Krista Mazza in the game files, while Carol looked similar to a teenage Downtownie, though I was unable to verify who this was exactly. The data in Cheryl and Krista's TXMT files especially are identical, right down to the makeup and specific facial customizations. The close similarities in appearance between Cheryl and Krista led to Ancient Sim theorizing that perhaps these Sims had accidentally been created twice. While it does seem likely that Cheryl and Carol were remade, or rather replaced in some manner by the newer matchmakers, Downtownies are unique in that they are generated from hard-coded templates. That's why some of them have makeup and accessories, tend to wear exclusively base game or nightlife outfits, and may result in clones. So although it's unlikely that these Downtownie doppelgangers are just a coincidence due to the close resemblances, it's also possible that they just simply spawn from the same template. Luckily, Cheryl and Carol rank low on the Borkage scale, and they don't seem to cause too much harm, especially when they're left alone. They're just another Downtown oddity. According to the Sims Wiki, their status as functioning matchmakers can be restored by moving them to the service NPC's household with SimPE. I'm not totally sure if it worked properly when I tried, because they still wore their casual clothes, but their NPC type did change from 0 to the correct value for matchmakers, 18, in the extended browser in SimPE. If it does work for you, then congrats. Instead of having some hidden Sims with no real purpose loitering around in the default household, you can have 5 whole matchmakers for your neighbourhood. While their data may not be in the best shape, they also aren't as buggy as some other hidden Sims who are known to have fractured data. Still though, it makes more sense to just leave them as they are and keep them quarantined in the default household just in case, especially if you're on the more cautious side. Alternatively, Cheryl and Carol have been erased from existence in Meet Me to the River's clean template, as have all Downtown service NPCs. The method Meet Me to the River uses to remove certain Sims is called Deleted 2, and tackles the problem of stray Sim references such as Sim Wants and Fears by cleaning them all out completely. This is best done with Sims like Downtown NPCs because they have no ties to living or existing Sims, reducing the risk of being referenced in other Sims memories or relationships, and allowing for a cleaner removal. While this method may not be totally perfect, it's a lot cleaner than in-game tools and pretty much the only and safest option for deleting Sims that we currently have without access to the source code. If you would rather play with the clean template as is advised, but still want these mysterious ladies in your game, you can use SimPE to extract their appearances, clone them in Body Shop, and recreate them in-game. If you're unsure how to do this, follow the guide on the Sims wiki. The cloning step is important, so make sure you always do this when you extract Sims appearances. Just because Cheryl and Carol may have funky data doesn't mean their replications need to as well. Remember how I said there'll be more about the weird relationships with object NPCs later? Well, get ready, cause it's later. While combing through the downtown template in the early research stage of this video, I noticed some pretty odd relationships between some downtownies, service NPCs, and even Vodwan Triku and object NPCs. According to Mutilda, these relationships with object NPCs may be benign, as long as the known box is not checked. The odd thing here though is that these object NPCs do have the known box ticked. Some of them even have very high lifetime and daily relationships with downtownies. But it gets weirder. The new object NPC introduced in Nightlife, Mrs. Cullenbottom, not only apparently knows the downtownie Ivy Butler, but she also has the family box ticked. Luckily, they do not have a defined relationship, and most importantly, this strange connection is not reflected in the family ties resource, meaning it shouldn't have much impact in-game. Another downtownie, Shanna Walton, however, does apparently have a defined relationship with Mrs. Cullenbottom. Despite the fact that Shanna is an adult and Mrs. Cullenbottom is an elder, in the downtown template, Mrs. Cullenbottom recognizes Shanna as her mother. Once again, this shouldn't affect gameplay or cause too much damage because this is not consistent with neither Shanna nor Cullenbottom's family ties. Weirdly, or I guess fortunately, these relationships do not appear after downtown is added to a main hood, so they may have no bearing at all on gameplay. Still though, they are included in this video because, in my opinion, they constitute as weird game behaviour. Or perhaps even normal, albeit still weird game behaviour, since this is not exclusive to downtown either. Sims in other subhoods and stealth hoods such as the vacation and uni hoods also share this oddity. But even if these relationships are possibly not indicative of corruption per se, it's still unclear why they would exist in the first place. Does the game generate these through normal gameplay, and if so, why? Is it a case of crossed wires or data gremlins? Did someone at Maxis really just decide this random downtownie would be the parent of Mrs. Cullenbottom? That's definitely doubtful, and it seems more likely that it's all just down to normal Sims 2 weirdness. The good news is that these relationships may be safe to remove, because to once again borrow from Mutilda's extensive knowledge of the game, sim relationships are stored in the neighbourhood package. This means they are separate from a sim's character file and, more importantly, the objects.package file, where the object NPC's data are stored. Therefore, editing the sim relations by unchecking the known box shouldn't modify the objects.package file and instead should only affect the neighbourhood package file, and the relationship values should hopefully decay through normal gameplay. We will cover why alterations to the objects.package file are not ideal in more detail soon, but for now keep it in the back of your mind. Moreover, it's still not an invitation to start setting the Grim Reaper as your sim spouse, because no one seems to be sure how harmful these relationships may be, and when it comes to game corruption in particular, it's always best to err on the side of caution. The problems mostly arise when apartment life is installed, because there is a bug with the new friend networking interaction, wherein a townie may attempt to introduce a playable sim to their object NPC friend, like the therapist, because they have so much in common, apparently. This can be prevented with Saijon's new friend fix mod. Some more good news though is that these relationships are unrequited. The object NPCs seem to know and have relationship values towards these downtown Sims, but the downtown Sims do not know nor have values with them in return, limiting the risk that they'll try introducing playables to their good friend the Grim Reaper. But then, if these relationships seem to disappear when downtown is added to a main hood, does it matter? Maybe not, and I did wonder if it was even worth mentioning because the overall impact on downtown gameplay is minimal. Still, to quote Talia aka Meet Me to the River, if these relationships are just garbage, are they harmless or harmful garbage? Keeping on the topic of object NPCs, here's another lesson in historical Sims 2 bugs, except this one's different from your average crashes during labour due to absent DNA, or Sims with commitment issues because it was a game-breaking bug. As you may already be aware, there are two forms of corruption in The Sims 2. These videos are dedicated to hood corruption, wherein data specific to a hood are compromised in some way. Hood corruption is contained to neighbourhood files only, meaning a full reinstall of the game cannot fix a corrupted neighbourhood. The second form of corruption, game corruption, affects the entire game however, thus warranting a reinstall to restore the broken files. Though a lot rarer than hood corruption, game corruption is far more serious, and most of the time the culprit is a corrupted objects package file. The objects package file not only stores data about items such as chairs or lamps and all other objects in the game, but it's also home to behavior functions or scripts, icons, and pretty much all global files. Needless to say, it's a critical core game file fundamental to the execution of The Sims 2, and so tampering with it causes serious game-wide problems. Typically, the most common cause of objects package corruption is object NPCs being interacted with outside of their intended purposes, such as adding them to households and saving the game, or editing their data in SimPE. However, there are also cases where the game is responsible for modifying the file, and we will soon learn more about one of these instances. As we've covered, object NPCs' character data are stored in the objects package file, hence the name. Technically, they are valid Sims in that they will generate Sim descriptions in every neighbourhood, hence why Hood Checker won't flag relationships with them as invalid unless it involves a non-existent Sim, but they are treated more as objects by the game due to their entanglement in the objects package, and most of all, they do not have playable character data, so they are unsafe to play with outside of their intended purposes. Since object NPCs are always the same and exist across all neighbourhoods, they are also interchangeably known as universal NPCs. Among these special Sims is Mrs. Cullenbottom, an object NPC introduced with Nightlife who will only appear in the downtown subhood and its community lots. Although if Seasons is installed, she may also crawl out of the wishing well on a home lot. Shortly after Nightlife was released, players began reporting that a new downtown service NPC, the Grand Vampire, had bitten Mrs. Cullenbottom during a biting spree, transforming her into a vampire. While players joked about Mrs. Cullenbottom suiting vampirism, Maxoid Tom, a Maxis engineer who worked on Sims 2 patches, warned players that this interaction would corrupt the objects package file because of the moderation to Mrs. Cullenbottom's outfit. Her transition to vampire would ultimately mess with the objects package file completely, with Maxoid Tom explaining this change to her data, quote, nukes a bunch of stuff in there, because she is, as Maxoid Tom says, bundled with the rest of the objects. Maxoid Tom assured players across Sims 2 forums that he was working on patching the bug for the second Nightlife patch, as the first patch was possibly approaching its deadline and Tom doubted his fix would be included. In the meantime, he requested modders at More Awesome Than You to create a mod, disallowing all object NPCs from being bitten by making the game check Sims who are about to become a Grand Vampire's snack and not object NPCs, implying this sort of failsafe wasn't in place originally, most likely because the game just wouldn't expect this to happen and so there would be no measures in place to prevent Grand Vampires from feasting on Mrs. Cullenbottom's neck. Enter Jfade, a modder who responded to Tom's call to arms by creating a hack that did exactly that. It overrides the BiteNeck test behavior function known as social kiss of the vampire test in the game files by adding logic so that the game checks if a sim is an NPC before they are bitten. If they are an NPC, then they would not be bitten. A few months later, Pescado released creature fixes, which also addressed the vampire issue along with adding other tweaks to creatures and other sim species. The second Nightlife patch eventually came out in February 2006 and, according to the patch notes, the problem of Mrs. Crumplebottom turning into Mrs. Cullenbottom was fixed. However, judging by how creature fixes is still considered a critical game mod recommended to all players due to its anti-Cullenbottom properties, as well as the fact players reported this problem as late as 12 years after the second Nightlife patch, it might still be a good idea to be alert and ensure this doesn't happen in your game. It's also a good idea to set all objects package files or possibly even the installation files as a whole to read only, preventing the game from writing to the file and modifying it, thus corrupting it. According to Tom, it seems that the objects package file shouldn't have been writable in the first place, so taking this precaution adds an extra layer of protection against total game corruption. If you are still worried about this happening, you can place the visitor controller by 2 Jeffs on all downtown lots, since it banishes Mrs. Crumplebottom by default, or you could also set it so that grand vampires are banned too. Apologies for the history lesson. I initially considered not including this bug because it can be prevented and the chances of it happening to you are low, as well as the fact that in most cases, damages to the objects package file is caused by player intervention and is not an inherent problem in a neighbourhood. So Mrs. Crumplebottom's existence is not corruption, nor inherently unsafe at all, nor will it cause the game to explode the second she steps on a lot. At worst, it's just an annoying inconvenience to romance sims. However, the distinction, and possibly the scariest part, is that this was autonomous. The problem was that once a grand vampire had gotten a taste for blood after biting a player's controllable sim, they would then go on to bite other sims on the community lot, including Mrs. Crumplebottom, since again it doesn't seem like the game would check if a sim was safe to bite. Ordinarily, vampires can only bite a sim's neck if they're at least best friends. However, this bug turned vampires into bite-happy beasts who could and would bite any sim regardless of relationship. Being best friends with Mrs. Crumplebottom is impossible, yet this issue caused vampires to defy the relationship rule and bite her anyway, despite her status as an object NPC. Since this bug was out of a player's control, fixing it was imperative, and even to this day, players are strongly encouraged to download creature fixes to prevent the game destruction this oversight was capable of. Alternatively, Jfade's mod is still available and updated for newer EPs, so it may be an option if you don't want the extra features of creature fixes, but still want to ensure your objects file is completely protected against this particular problem. Mentioning this historical bug also offers the opportunity to clarify that it is normal for playable sims to have pie menu options available when clicking on Mrs. Crumplebottom. It is perfectly normal and safe to interact with her within these parameters. She will not show up in the relationship panel, nor will your playable sim gain a memory of meeting her, and the interaction attempt typically falls out of the action queue anyway. If social interactions with Crumplebutt succeed in a vanilla game, however, once again this is normal, and not considered to be interacting with her outside of her intended purpose. She'll probably just react by smacking your sim with her purse in response, and well, I'd say that's well within her intended purpose. Before we wrap up this video, I'd like to highlight another downtown quirk that may commonly be mistaken for corruption. Ordinarily, a child having a lifetime 1 is a symptom of corruption because it indicates the child has inherited a possibly deleted Sims dangling sim wants and fears. As all children have the default grow up aspiration, which has no lifetime wants attached to it, then they shouldn't have a lifetime 1, at least not through normal gameplay. However, for some reason, all downtown downtowny children have lifetime wants. While this is odd and there doesn't seem to be any real reason why they have lifetime wants so prematurely, it's not concerning because it's more likely to have been done on purpose, or at the very least it's probably not a side effect of possible sim deletion in this case. Moreover, many of the playable children and even toddlers in the EP hoods have lifetime wants too, so this is not an isolated occurrence. Not to mention, since these particular child sims are downtownies, a player would most likely never even notice they have lifetime wants in the first place, unless they make them playable or use a mod that allows sims to adopt children from the townie pool. All in all, the kids of downtown having big dreams for the future already is nothing to worry about. You may be thinking, well, what if I make my own custom downtowns instead? Surely that means I can avoid all these issues. Unfortunately, basically everything highlighted in this video still applies to custom downtowns. Or at least, it applies to downtowns that are the first or only downtown subhood generated. Even if you choose to add your own custom downtown, the game still accesses the downtown template in the program files to create the subhood. In particular, it uses the characters folder where all the downtownies and NPCs character files are stored. This same folder also contains the files of the deceased Triku family and Raynell, meaning they will also appear in custom downtowns. But newly created custom downtowns are empty in that they don't contain any lots, including the House of Fallen Trees and Gothia Green Lawns, where Raynell and the Triku family are buried. So what happens to their graves? As we know, deleting graves is a VBT because it's akin to improperly deleting sims. So is the appearance of these now graveless sims problematic? The good news is that, from what I found, the Trikus and Raynell appear to be fine in custom downtowns despite no longer having graves. They are not unlinked, so their character files are intact and they can still be resurrected just fine. Still, if you are a cautious player or just want some peace of mind if nothing else, you can reunite these deceased sims with their graves using either the Bat Box or the assignable gravestone by Cathair 2005. Though not totally necessary since their data do seem to be properly contained in some manner, some players may find reassurance knowing these sims can be accounted for in custom hoods. Alternatively, if you don't want the Trikus and Raynell or really any of the downtown sims in your custom downtowns, check out Jawusa's empty downtown template. The method of creating these templates is completely safe, and it's also a great way of capping hood populations, especially if you want to add multiple subhoods or play a mega hood, though you're most likely never going to hit the game's character file limit. Still, the original downtown template does come with almost 80 total character files, and sometimes it's just reassuring knowing they're all accounted for. This series sets out to answer two questions. First, we establish if a pre-made neighbourhood ships pre-corrupted by examining evidence both supporting and debunking known problems, and if it does, then we quantify its corruption to determine how pre-corrupted it is. The purpose isn't to scare or discourage anyone from playing this wonderful game. If anything, it's intended to encourage people to play it by offering fixes, clean versions of the hoods, and precautionary measures so everyone can enjoy the game that has brought me and thousands of people so much happiness over the last 2 decades. Most of the things mentioned here are developmental oversights or bugs that aren't corruption per se, but they are included in these compilations if only to take the opportunity to clarify that not all weirdness equals corruption. The most serious problem in this video was only a potential possibility rather than an inherent issue, guaranteed to always cause problems, but it's still included because it is related to characters who only appear downtown, as well as its interesting history and overall level of fatality. The second most concerning issue is potentially improperly deleted sims in downtown. Though irreversible, some of their stray data can be swept up by Hoodchecker at least. If you don't plan on resurrecting the Trikus, then a lot of these problems can be avoided. Some oddities in the downtown template disappear when downtown is made playable. The deceased Sims are resurrectable and have full character data, and any less serious data corruption like invalid and corrupted death memories can be swiped. So compared to the previous hoods in this series, downtown is safer and not totally FUBAR. So while an answer to both of the fundamental questions of not really may be justified, the thing is, what constitutes as not really corrupted is so individual to each player. If none of the entries in this video bother you and you don't feel a clean downtown template would be necessary for you, then that's completely your choice. However, if you want to fix most of the problems, corruption or not, like the loose family ties, corrupted death memories, or even just prevention against Orion and Tiav's broken face templates, check out Meet Me to the River's clean downtown template. It's a little trickier to install, so be sure to follow the guide carefully. Alternatively, empty templates are available if you want to make custom downtowns, or just want the Maxis downtown without the Maxis features. Just a heads up though that installing the new downtown template of your choice won't affect downtowns already added to pre-existing hoods, as they were generated with the default template. Ultimately, and this may be anticlimactic, but the choice is up to you. As Mutilda says, it makes sense to use clean templates where problems have been fixed, and if you plan on playing a hood for a long time, it's encouraged you practice good hygiene. The beautiful thing about playing this game in 2021 is that this community is full of skilled modders and programmers who have dedicated so much time and effort over the years to ensure we can play this game as smoothly as possible. So however you choose to play, go ahead and book a taxi and prepare for Mrs. Crumplebottom's Purse of Wrath, because it looks like you're going downtown. Wow, okay, hi, so if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I'm so sorry this took longer than expected, so thank you all for your patience and understanding. I hope this was worth the wait, maybe, and I hope the length of this video isn't too off-putting. Next up in this series will of course be Bluewater Village, however I am hoping to take a short break in order to focus on some smaller projects related to corruption and videos about technical stuff like scrapped code still in the base game or other developmental stuff. But I assure you, Bluewater Village will be the next neighbourhood to undergo the Tanic Sims 2 treatment. There's a lot to cover because for some reason Dead Sims got balked again, so look forward to that. If this is my last video of 2021, then wow, there's so much I want to say, but I imagine this video may already be long enough. I'm sure I will have posted a big sappy post somewhere to thank you all for making this the best year I've had in a long time. Just thank you so much. I hope you had a year that was as wonderful as you are, and that next year will bring you even more joy and happiness. Let's meet again in 2022. I'm going to love you and leave you now, so please remember to stay safe, be good, and most of all, happy simming. Happy New Year, everyone. Bye.